Joining me now from Qiddiya, Israel, is NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez and former Defense Secretary William Cohen from the Clinton administration. So, Raf, first to you, what is the latest that you're hearing from Israel about retaliation against Iran?
Well, Andrea, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met at the Defense Ministry in Tel Aviv earlier today with the Chief of Staff, Israel's most senior general, the head of the Mossad, Israel's foreign intelligence agency, and the Shin Bet, the domestic agency. And there was one topic top of their agenda: how, when, at what scale to respond to this unprecedented Iranian ballistic missile attack. An Israeli official tells me this response will come swiftly. Israel is absolutely determined to show Iran and the world that an attack like this cannot go unanswered. We can look for clues as to what happened last time, back in April, when Iran fired that first barrage of drones, missiles at Israel. Then it took 5 days before Israel launched what, frankly, was a very small-scale response, a minor strike at an airbase in western Iran. Israel never publicly acknowledged it was behind that attack, even though in private Israeli officials said they were responsible. There is a very different tone right now in the aftermath of those Iranian ballistic missiles coming down, one of them blowing off part of the wall of the school here behind me. Israel is very publicly signaling it plans to respond. They are saying it is coming soon. There is one complicating factor. Andrea, the sun has gone down here in Israel. We are now in Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. There are a slew of Jewish holidays coming swiftly in the following days, Yom Kippur and others. That is somewhat of a complication as Israel determines when to carry out this retaliation. But we are very much at the point of when and not if. And the question is, what role will the Biden administration play? You have heard both President Biden, Vice President Harris saying that Iran needs to be held accountable, that there will be consequences for this strike. But you can imagine at the same time the Biden administration trying to counsel restraint, especially given that almost miraculously no Israelis were killed or seriously injured during this missile attack. There was a Palestinian man in the occupied West Bank who was killed by shrapnel falling after one of those interceptions. Andrea.
And, Raf, what about their first use of hypersonic missiles, homemade Fatah missiles?
So Israel's military is saying that these were not hypersonic missiles, that this is a claim coming from Iran. We've heard similar claims coming from the Houthis. I can tell you, Andrea, as someone who was just staring up at the night sky in awe last night as these deadly shooting stars streaked across, they just literally did not look to us like they were moving fast enough to be hypersonic missiles. So that doesn't seem to have been the case. It is the case that some of those missiles did break through these layers of defense: Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system, Israeli warplanes which were in the air, U.S. naval destroyers in the Middle East. We don't know exactly how many of them landed here in central Israel. There are some very visible signs of that aftermath, this damaged school. There is a crater not far from the Mossad headquarters. But there is also damage that we haven't been able to see. And one of the big questions is how much, what kind of damage was there to Israeli air bases as a result of these strikes? Israel saying its air power operations are not affected. Andrea.
Raf Sanchez, thank you. And William Cohen, Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for joining us today. How do you think that Israel is going to respond? And do you think that they would take the enormous step of going after the nuclear program?
Well, I'm guessing as much as anyone else, but I believe that the Israelis will take this opportunity and use the chance they have right now to inflict far more serious damage on Iran than ever before. Iran, since the overthrow of the Shah, has been dedicated to Israel's destruction. Hezbollah as well, Hamas as well. So from the Israeli point of view, this is, quote, existential. Their existence is on the line. So I think they'll respond rather aggressively. I think they will target fixed silos, missile production facilities, perhaps even chemical weapons production facilities, and certainly, in my opinion, it will go after some of the nuclear capable production facilities that they have. I think they're going to act in a very, very aggressive way and soon, and not wait for the end of the holidays. I think time in this particular case is not on their side. They need to act quickly if they're going to, because the world community is going to come in and say, stop, let's have a peaceful solution. And I think at this point the Israelis don't want a peaceful solution. They want to punish the Iranians and punish them very severely.
The U.S. has said, the president has said that they will defend Israel to its core when it's attacked by Iran. Yet, in the days leading up to that, even after the successful attack successful from the Israeli standpoint of taking out Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader, the Secretary Blinken, others, the president, calling for a ceasefire, calling for diplomacy. What do you think Israel would do? Do you think that they would go after the nuclear program without at least a green light, maybe a yellow warning light from the U.S.? Could they blindside the U.S. on something that important? And do they need American refueling, mid-air refueling, in order to accomplish the task? The United States, excuse me, Biden administration was blindsided by the attack in Lebanon and the elimination of Nasrallah. So I would say no more surprises. If it's any message to go to the Israelis, no more surprises. We know that you have been under attack now. We know you're going to respond. We want to be in this planning operation as well. Don't surprise us with something that you do which we think is contrary to your interests, or certainly to our own, because we have interests as well in the region. So I would hope that the administration is very much in a part of this planning. I don't know that the Israelis will accept that. I think that they're saying we have an opportunity here we haven't had in the past. We've got the Hamas under attack. We've got the disruption of Hezbollah. We've got Iran that's been exposed for its weaknesses. It looked weak. If it didn't take action, it looked weak when it did. So I think the Israelis feel we're in the we have the whip hand now, and we're going to use it to punish the Iranians and set them back as far as we can. The problem is going to be the consequences of that. The Iranians are no match for us. They're no match, I don't think, for the Israelis. But they do have a network of terror groups around the world, and they will respond asymmetrically in various places around the world, including the United States. So this is what the Biden administration is concerned about, and I assume that that's being communicated to the Israeli Prime Minister. How that's going to play out, it's anyone's guess at this point. And I'm just reading that after a very strong, supportive speech to the United Nations Security Council today by our U.S. Ambassador, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, Iran's ambassador has just said publicly at the Security Council that Israel is pushing the region to the edge of a, quote, unprecedented catastrophe. I don't have to tell you, as a former senator, a House member at a key moment in history as well, and a cabinet member in the Bill Clinton administration, that this is the closing weeks, final month and a week, less than a week, of this election. The administration is really being put in a very difficult place by the Middle East blowing up, potentially getting worse. And if Israel were to go after the oil supplies, the oil fields in Iran, already there's been a spike in energy prices. You can see what's happening, and the Houthis are, of course, a threat in the Red Sea to shipping. What is the potential politically for this administration?
Sure. The price of oil has already spiked. It will go higher. I don't believe we've seen the end of that spike, because the Israelis can take out oil facilities at any time, in my judgment. What they can't do, take out at any time, is the nuclear facilities. That will require the assistance of the United States, in my opinion. And so this is where the debate, I think, is taking place behind closed doors in terms of what the Israelis are prepared to do. They can take out the oil facilities. The price of oil will continue to go up. The Saudis have lectured, I think, the OPEC nations, don't start producing more oil to bring the price down because we'll undercut you and drop the price to $50. So Saudis are there saying, don't start undercutting us now with the price of oil. So I think the price will go up. It'll have ramifications for the world economy. It'll have certainly an impact here at home at a time when we've got the damage by Helene. We've also got the strike taking place. So there's a lot on the table. And I think the Biden administration is handicapped, as you pointed out. They don't want to appear to be putting a horse collar around Prime Minister Netanyahu or around the vice president. So I think the Biden administration is in a difficult place. And I think Bibi Netanyahu is going to exploit that. I think he's going to say, this is an opportunity for me to take advantage of all that's going on in the world, to strike now and to strike hard.